Alrighty. Hi, everyone. My name is Shriya Musuku. Today, I'm going to be presenting on the health facility for the Mission 175 here at Habitat Marte. So let's get started. We have several topics of discussion, including internal design, the machines and technology that we can use in the operation, uh, and the installation process, and looking into resources, organizational structure, astronaut training, and also guidelines and protocols that we are to follow for the health facility in this lunar habitat that we're designing. We also have a couple other topics like 3D printing and spin-offs, so we'll get into those really quick. All right, so starting with the internal design, we have this picture of the health facility that was designed by Habitat Marte in the context of the larger operations. So we have also the main station, launch center, greenhouse, and other things that connect to the facility. And we are looking at integrating our location with all of their operations as well. So I have some external design concepts here that I have generated using some prompt work with Google AI. The reason I use this was because I'm not an animator myself. I'm an engineer by trade. So looking at the external design and creating a sustainable life, that has to be impactful. And there's been several studies shown on how that's good for mental health. And I thought these can be examples of how we can, once we have this inflatable concept, make our design even more beautiful. So, still sticking with the hexagonal concept that the team has talked about in the past, we have these pods that we can place on the moon's surface. And on the far right, we have this picture of an interior that can, looking out onto the moon surface, provide us with both protection, but a good view out onto what is happening. So to understand how this structure works, we can look at the landscape of the moon first. We have on the left a picture of the South Pole of the moon as taken by a Japanese spacecraft. And on that image, we see this distribution of surface ice that we see in blue color, and there's no light that's available inside those craters, but both poles are always lit in the moon, and the other parts kind of have changing light based on the sun. So these are things to keep in mind when we are designing. So to create the structural safety we need, we have this basic method to counter us from the radiation that can be using uh, the regolith on the moon, the other resources such as hydrogen or were also found to be a good idea. So one suggestion I saw online was that hydrogen can act as a shield. So I was thinking that these hydrogen or water-rich with hydrogen molecules can be put on the outer surface to create a transparent design where even the windows can be shielded from radiation. And with the regolith, there's already been efforts to 3D print it in the moon itself and put that around the inflatable habit as an extra protection from not only the radiation but microabrasion. So a couple images generated also with Google to show how we can create the hydrogen film as seen in the bottom picture and place it on the window. Very similar to how we would have something for mosquitoes on Earth, but it can just be for that radiation barrier out there. Looking further into the internal design and the structure, okay, how do we organize the rooms? This is one idea I had for structuring 3 floors in that hexagonal pod. Um, so we have on floor 1 for the health facility, it's where everyone can walk in. If they need any services, we have 2 exam rooms in the back for the people to go and have examinations, health services, any procedures in privacy. There's a couple storage closets labeled by 1, 2 on the first floor, and then it's the main working area so that when somebody's working, they can also be available for the patient who comes in and have a reception desk at the front. Then we also have the 2 doors connecting to the facilities since we had them The station is linked to the full operations. So we have two doors marked by blue on opposite corners as we see. In between those doors, there's stairs going up to the other floors where there's occupancy for the members of the health facility. So we have a gym that I tried to make it a fairly large space here, occupying a quarter of that second floor. We have an entertainment room and a kitchen and dining that's flowing together, kind of giving more space, more open concept. And a toilet can be located in the bottom as well, just, so that it's easily accessible for those who are working or entertaining themselves. The food pods marked here can move in and out. I was thinking that I've seen some designs where you can push the windows a little farther out. Because it's an inflatable habitat, that's one way to create space. The third floor, we have four bedrooms as we see, so fairly small area here that we have to work with. So I try to make it as efficient and clean looking. We have four bedrooms with closets 3, 4, 5, 6 that create individual pods for people with storage spaces. 7 and 8 were bathroom and shower areas so that they can have a larger space to put their cosmetic items and other things there as well on the moon. The common area just flows onto the stairs, and areas 9 and 10, I left it as a flex space. Can either be made into a closet or something to sit and look out if there's windows there. So that being said, that is an idea for how we can organize the facility. And we do see that the design, I stuck to 8 meters for the total width of this on the largest side. That way it can fit in any rocket like SpaceX's Heavy and be launched up to Mars and inflated there as needed. Okay, so applied technologies that we are going to be using. Facility operations requires these health technologies, which is what I'll be focusing on. First, of course, is our spacesuit, but underneath that, I found this biomonitoring technology from a company in Canada and the Canadian Space Agency here. So they monitor all these kinds of data. There's pulse activity, blood pressure, breathing rate and volume, skin temperature, blood oxygen saturation, and physical activity. And that is very cool because this can just be an internal vest and this neck band underneath the suit that is very light. And that way it can both have contact and also connect with this on-orbital controller and their suit as needed. I don't know the feasibility of wearing this under everything else, so that is one thing that will have to be tested, but it is a cool environment designed for space in itself. So looking at other things that the facility must contain that are outside of the astronaut's human body, we have this medical kit that was used in Apollo's in-flight missions that's shown on the top here. That contained a large book of directions, and in the first aid kit, you can see there is a BP cuff, some medications, and a stethoscope. Now it's been expanded on the International Space Station to include a defibrillator. There's also portable ultrasounds now, which is super cool, and devices for looking into the eye, saline, bandage kits, and even many surgery items and microbiology test kits. So those are all things that can be taken directly to the moon on these rockets um, in our and placed in our facility for use as well on the moon. And then these are things that need further research, but it is worth mentioning that if we are staying there for a super long time, in addition to having a beautiful design, we may need bone and x-ray scans, something to scan like, CAT scan to scan your nerves, etc. I believe that's the correct device there, the MRI, so on and so forth. Other items that will be easier to acquire and need less research are respirators for when you go outside, so it can create a good environment, or radiation protection kits, so just additional things for the astronaut suit, and mental health resources, including personal items and an entertainment area that we'll discuss soon. Here in the picture, we see an example of that ultrasound that's already in use, so we know that these diagnostic technologies are moving forward in space, and that could be an exciting area of research for those who are doctors and engineers working in the creation of these technologies. Some other things to include for if we are to live on the moon's surface, we would need a bed or a stretcher, as they call it, for the patients. And a cool picture here is this surgery robot that was placed on the International Space Station. It cut using this surgeon on Earth. And they did figure out things like lag time and other items here. But the Space Mirror, it's a small robot. And I myself had the privilege of working on Intuitive Surgical Robotics' machines, which is another company that produces them. But they've only been used on Earth, so who knows if they have other expanded devices at this point as well. So settlement locations and resources available. I just wanted to touch base on this again. So we have different regions we can consider to land on with all of these items that will affect the way we live. First is the polar region where there's constant solar power. There's ice for fuel, water, and air. Then we can land on the near or the far side where we can see home or really have radio silence. Of course, the near and far side are less in consideration because of the available resources, but it's just cool to mention that these are ideas that people have had for various missions so far. So leading into the resources, where we land does affect the items we have. So let's talk about what we already can use on the moon. First, we have solar power, like I talked about. There's 2 days of day, 2 weeks of day and 2 weeks of night. So that is the exact dates on how long there's illumination and darkness. The poles are illuminated constantly and the craters are always shaded. So knowing that, we can generate solar power and work with the base to have better circadian rhythm for wherever we set up. We probably won't land in the craters because they're so cold, but somewhere outside could be an option and seems to be what has been suggested the most. Then we have natural resources we can use, so water, even minerals and metals here. So iron, silicon, magnesium, calcium, so on and so forth. Of course, we have talked about the regolith, but the other use instead of just external protection is it can be a source of oxygen apparently because of the embedded oxygen that was trapped in it. There's also methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, which could be potential fuels, etc., and they're located in the craters. Resources to transport from Earth. Now, while we have all of the other things we just discussed, there's no organic materials on the moon. There's carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen that we will need if we want an immediate supply. We also want to bring all of our plants, so including the soil, the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus fertilizer that we need here, the NPK fertilizer, and all of our food, robotics, and habitat and shelter. So that's fairly obvious, but just to state it clearly, those are the items that we will need. Looking into management of the facility in itself, we have an organizational structure. So first we have the main director, top person who's running the main station. They can give some orders and directives and collaborate with the health center. So information can be exchanged freely, but creating a structure where the main person at the top can direct how the other operation can go. And then the health center director has control of all of their professionals who include the physician, who's a medical doctor, behavioral mental health specialist in case they need collaboration on that front. They could be a psychiatrist, so we'll talk about the qualifications in a second as well, and a research assistant or nurse to help both of them conduct any procedures. One interesting thing to note, even currently we do this, we have a medical control center on Earth. So even in first response missions, they have a control center in a larger hospital to give direction. That is something to consider as we land on the moon to create a more collaborative and cohesive health environment for people traveling as well. Then looking at the profiles of each of these people, health center director, let's talk about that person first. They are trained in health and facilities management and can operate as a medical resource if needed, meaning at the bare minimum, they need to have the management skill to look at the larger level operations, but can be a first responder. If they are a medical doctor who's willing to participate in the program, that is even better. Then I have structured a medical doctor in. He's the person for all the physical health needs and any research conduction for the data that we collect. A behavioral health specialist can be a therapist or psychiatrist who's passionate about the equity in treatment. And why I say that is because we may have all these different people, so this person needs to be able to communicate with all of them. Not necessarily in terms of language, we can have interpreters, but more in terms of having empathy for the patients. And we have a research or nurse assistant, so they preferably have first response training and also have worked in a research lab so they understand how to follow instructions and protocols. In terms of responsibilities, we've talked about this. There's that top-down structure of overseeing the research. I've also assigned for the research assistant to keep the facility clean and safe. The behavioral health specialist here can also be somebody who advocates for resources and acquires them for patients. But aside from that, all of the other information we discussed remains the same. So, looking into the astronaut training program, we've extensively talked about regular training protocols, so we will leave that be for now. There's just the 1 year basic training, flight and scuba experience, and a STEM degree ideally to have to become an astronaut at this current point. But let's focus more on the new avenue that I found online. NASA offers a clerkship for medical students. So this is only for US citizens, unfortunately. But they have this experience where they can learn more about space medicine for those who are already undergoing medical school. That person would be training with the Johnson Space Center's medicine operations team. There's also an International and Astronautical Sciences Institute for extra and intravehicular training opportunities in extreme medicine. This is where a lot of astronauts go to train, even for commercial programs. And one person, the director of these programs, I believe, is Dr. Shauna Pandya, who is a medical doctor who has flown to space, showing that this is very possible for people in the health careers. I have a lot of YouTube videos here. I'm not going to click on each of them, but they are talking about the importance of first aid and a couple things for basic life support skills that I have found online. These are all based on things that I've had the privilege of learning through the course that I have taken here in the US. Then I've also included some firefighter rescue techniques where if somebody is outside and they're just unable to come back in, this is how, they're in a dangerous environment and we need to remove them from that. There's some links on how we can use rope or strong webbing to move them, no matter who the person is, they can create this technique. So we just carry that stuff on us. And that is an example that one can look into for procedures if someone gets stuck on the moon. I also included creating knots, quick and easy drags, etc. If we're conducting missions outside, these can be useful. And at the bottom, the last two links are super interesting. There's one person testing out an astronaut's exercise regime, and we can see how challenging it can be. And there's also Cleo Abram, who tested out NASA's new spacesuit, and we can also see what movements they're able to do because these spacesuits are limited in the way you move. It's not the way we think it is. There's only a few degrees of rotation that we have to consider if we are being an astronaut. Resources needed for 1 week. So simple things, first aid kit, as we are at the health facility, research materials, EVA suits, depending on the project, EVA as in extra vehicle activity. Of course, food. So I have some guidelines here on that. So 2,500 calories, way overestimated, but that is okay. And at least 1 gram of protein per body weight. And this could be another thing to consider as we need to keep our astronauts healthy and have good nutrition for them. Water, of course, for shower, eating, and cosmetic and sanitary items. And lastly, some entertainment items as well, depending on the personal preferences. Okay, so getting into guidelines and protocols, we have this guideline to be provided to other facilities with three key pillars. The astronauts must exercise daily. We look at around 2 hours, which is typical for ISS, to prevent muscle or bone loss. And if this isn't possible, we can discuss with the astronaut what is going on and conduct health checks. Also, there's monitoring the health, so this can be an integrated part to understand long-term performance, as we talked about with the undersuit that the astronaut can wear to monitor blood pressure and other things. And this last thing I included is a mental health component to understand one's personal readiness. As you train for these things, you will know if you can perform effectively and safely, but it's very important to teach these people to advocate for themselves, especially as commercial and space tourism becomes very, very prevalent. Not everyone has necessarily all of the training or the time to train on these. So understanding that they can have a telehealth line and in-house health facility becomes more and more important. Looking into protocols in particular, this is for the crew. They must follow all main station policies, have regular health checks, and also debrief about the crew's health on the rest of the station. They must conduct regular equipment and stocking checks so nobody runs out of anything. And there should be someone who can respond to emergencies at all times. So if somebody walks in the middle of the night, we're still able to do things for them. The health crew also must be trained and have their licenses up to date. That's just, I feel like something that should be written in, but it's expected of everyone. And we have crews research hours must be limited to 4 hours daily on experiments and documentation. I wrote that in as a personal thought or suggestion because we have 2 hours of exercise and they must still be working and treating patients. So kind of having general guidelines on how much they can expect to work might be good. Of course, that number can change, but I thought that was a good start for now. Safety protocols, so we're getting quite close to the end here, but as we go through the next couple of slides, we'll have some text. Fire suppression equipment, first response items, radiation kit and respirators, and that might be important as the moon is not, they don't have an atmosphere and it's not protected. And looking into protocols in the way we are operating and reassessing them for human body and how it functions in space. So I have included a link for a reading on what happens already, and there's probably going to be more research added as we go along. So occupancy and entertainment protocols, we're coming to more of the fun part here. The health facility must have appropriate time to exercise. So I've suggested some events, monthly, weekly, and daily events for them to have personal time. And in case of illness, we should bring additional people in and have backup crews available or other people who can respond to these things. An entertainment room available. And I think this concept of a pod is something we can introduce. Each person can have their own personal space in those bedrooms. And if they need anything, they can go there for personal time, research, or just quiet time. So how can the life look on space? Again, I created these images using some AI generators, but we can have this front reception desk with plants, an entertainment room with books, and maybe an interactive table. I've seen and read books like Ender's Game, which are really fun visualizations on how to live on space. And those entertainment tables seem like it could be a good way to learn skills and even visualize other things. There's a gym and TV with a VR AR seat that we see here as well on the bottom. And those are other ideas on quick and easy to transport items that we can include in the particular rooms we have. So food and micro production protocols, there's been a lot of research on this, but the possibility of creating a mini greenhouse or vertical garden is very appealing. I have a couple of images suggesting these pods or even like the shelves if we can't have that big of a space to create the food and herbs we need. So I would say that this can be placed up top as carbon dioxide, it rises with the air, and the plants can use that there recycle it if it's placed towards the top of the room. I'm assuming here that the facility itself is pressurized, and so we can create the needed environment and water and light for the plants, and they're already protected. But if they have a more delicate plant, the top image I show here can be a climate controlled pod that we can have just completely for them if needed. Another smaller way to create that same pod is shown on the left here too. And I thought that was interesting because those are already included and ready to go on Earth, those little climate controlled egg-shaped pods in this case. Right, so 3D printing protocols, we talked about the regolith, which is already there. I'm looking at some research aspects rather than resources we can use. And that is something that can be part of entertainment for astronauts, but the printing of tissues and research organs is becoming very, very unique and I would say advancing quickly. So recently I saw an article on how bioink from egg whites can be used to create tissues, and that can also be a way of healing injuries for astronauts or testing on how we can create grafts for people so that they can have any, if they have burns or such things, they can have any repairs. We also have tissue engineering scaffolds and microfluidics research that can be conducted. The last one is more of a personal suggestion, as I have worked a lot in the computational fluid dynamics realm. The addition of the fluids and the flow through the 3D printers, it might change with gravity, and researching those aspects can be a good thing that we can simulate even on Earth for all of these applications. So, spin-offs, we have several technologies that can be applied in Earth. Very cool things in terms of health. We have Alzheimer's research. So, protein synthesis and fluid flow in space has really advanced this because we found that the protein and the plaque that is caused can be decreased through this research. I don't know the particular biology details, but there are several articles out there for those interested. Cancer treatment and organ growth, there are studies showing that cells grow faster in space. So creating synthetic organs that are custom for patients, this is something that's been done on Earth and is in progress. What if we take it out to space? There's also research that has returned to Earth on protecting muscles and bones. So there's molecular signaling pathways that prevent bone losses, and they've been changed in astronauts so that they can operate in these microgravity environment for a long time. We can also consider using that for elderly, and this is something that's already been done. So in the ISS we see here, it looks quite busy here and there's a lot of work going on. So astronaut Christina Koch, I believe that's how you say the name, is performing some of these experiments with protein synthesis. And that is one thing we can consider extending into lunar habitats as well. So lastly, a couple slides to conclude guidelines to be applied for daily life on Earth. What can we learn from this lunar habitat? We have several ideas for radiation exposure, and I would say that as our atmosphere is changing and we have these polluting substances, yes, controlling that is very good and really looking into sustainability, but it may be important to look at how patients and people can use this in locations where the ozone layer is wearing down, etc. That can be one spin-off idea, and that is not something I've researched so far, but could be something to look into. Health tracking protocols. So we have all of these ideas for improving access for people in space. What if we extend that to create them for people who don't have that accessibility, people who don't have that money, by making these space vests more subsidized so that we can monitor long-term health for people on Earth as well. Then lastly, creating sustainability and greenhouse development. This, obviously, we can look into it on Earth, but since it grows here, I think it would be even easier to do and more effective than on the moon. And I noticed that most people, right, we go outside to buy our food. Why don't we start creating it ourselves? So I think more education and more information for Earth dwellers can be a really great way to have everyone involved in space and Earth missions here as well. Impacts to Sustainable Development Goals. This is our last major topic. I have a couple different ideas here on impacts, but we have immediate and long-term impacts where first we can create good health, good education, and even have access for both men and women. We can also have good sanitation and infrastructure as we go onto the moon because these are immediately needed. But then as we expand for longer term, bring more and more people on, reducing inequalities and improving sustainability, creating peace and climate action will take longer term policies. And so we have this highlighted impact of health policy professionals and people who are doing research on these community-based ideas. And that is something to look into starting today and would be amazing to have more research papers come out on as well. So these are my references. Thank you everyone for listening. And here is my contact. My LinkedIn with a QR code is attached for anyone who wants to connect as well.